What we're talking about here is the opportunity and the ability now, having incorporated the first 9 spiritual principles, is to maintain what we have at the moment. And it's all about today.
Step 10 is more about the present and looking at things on a day-to-day basis that we might do wrong and going back, checking over them and making amends where necessary.
Because it says I continue to take a daily inventory, and when I was wrong, promptly admitted it. That's a really key point. When I was wrong, promptly admitted. Looking at the things I do and don't do right is a bit where.
So when we talk about taking a moral inventory, what most people are taught in the fellowships is that on a daily basis, and sometimes it's at night, they need to look at themselves in particular areas. And these areas come up from their step 6 and step 7, which are their defects of character and their shortcomings. Now, having had a heightened sense of awareness of your defects of character and your shortcomings, most people will be aware immediately that they have harmed somebody.
If I've upset someone, then I'm probably going to feel something. And it's being aware about how I'm feeling and taking responsibility for my attitudes, behaviours and actions.
When I haven't acted in a way that I wanted to act, or I've said something that's hurt someone, or I've behaved in a way that that doesn't sit right with me, I can recognise that and make changes either for my own behaviour or admit when I've done something wrong and make amends for it.
It's about admitting your wrongs and making an effort to change them, to change your behaviour, and looking at your character defects on a daily basis and seeing what you can do to alter that and to better yourself.
To look at those behaviours, to look at those actions, attitudes, and rectify them when you recognise that something's not right about your behaviour, to rectify them by changing, adapting the behaviour, possibly even apologising to a person if necessary.
It's a step that's encouraged for people to work within the day. So when they get to the end of the day, they can reflect, they can take personal inventory, they can look at how their day has been, what worked for them, what didn't work for them.
Before I go to bed at night, I write a list. I've got a list of assets and a list of defects, and I'll tick each side. If I've been overly dishonest one day, if I've been overly resentful, then I've got it there ticked. But I've also got my assets, and that really helps me because I can become aware of the way I've been acting and the way I've been behaving. And then I can try the following day to act more on my assets rather than my defects.
It's a step to almost get out of your system, so when you go to sleep and wake up the next day, you can start afresh. As a 12-step program is all about focusing on a 24-hour period.
This is about change. You know, we've put down our drugs and alcohol or anything else that is causing us a problem, and we are now looking at how we change and how we stay changed. It is also important that we do step 10 as a reflection in an evening, because by the morning my thoughts and feelings will have changed again. And so I find it much more useful to do it in an evening. You can do it in the morning, but I think on a whole it's better to do it in the evening because then I can really reflect and know what I need to do for the next day.
Some of the time it can be quite difficult to do because you may have a lot going on in your day. At the end of the day you might be really tired. But ideally if you could focus on things that have really jumped out at you, it could be really helpful. If you continue to do it, like anything in life, it gets easier.
Luckily, I do have other people in recovery and I have my sponsor around me, and these days I tend to question my behaviour. You know, I monitor my behaviour and my thoughts far more than I used to.
It's certainly a helpful tool in trying to manage your day, because a lot of people, certainly in early recovery, would tend to live in the past and project into the future. So doing a personal inventory on a day-to-day basis helps them hopefully be more grounded and settled just in a short period of time, where it doesn't feel so complicated or difficult or stressful for them.
I like to look upon this as being able to process the way you've been with other people and how other people have been with you throughout your day. I would sit in meditation and go through my inventory process that way. People do it different ways. Some people will write it down, they write their inventory down, they write down how they've been with people. There's different ways of doing it.
Taking a personal inventory at the end of each day, it's not always going to be a bad thing. Sometimes, you know, our defects of character, like our selfishness or arrogance or pride, might slip in. But, you know, quite often we've been humble and kind and compassionate and been able to do a lot for other people.
It's very liberating afterwards, you know, to go through this process. It's very liberating. And it's like a cleansing process, I guess, the inventory. I guess it's like an emotional or a spiritual cleansing process, because you're letting go of stuff that's built up inside you, because we all do that. We all build up stuff, don't we, with our families, with our loved ones, with our kids, with our work colleagues. We pick this stuff up, you know, and it's like cleaning that away and letting go of it.
Step 10 not only helps me maintain my recovery, but it helps me maintain relationships with people. It's important for me to know when I'm affecting someone else, and if I don't look at myself and recognise that, then it's going to affect the relationships that I have, and that's relationships with family, it's relationships with work colleagues, relationships with other people in recovery, relationships with my daughter. Those relationships are improved when I can recognise when I've done something wrong, admit that, and you know, and make amends and change my behaviour.
So it's a way of keeping oneself in check on an ongoing basis, rather than looking in retrospect at issues from the past.
It takes perseverance, and I need to do it on a daily basis, but it makes me feel so much better about life in general when I'm keeping on top of these things.
It gives me a guideline, it gives me some place to be able to look at my feelings, to maybe dump those feelings before I go to sleep at night, so I'm able to let go. But I really find it a key. It's a maintenance step, and I believe it's crucial to my recovery.
Nobody works a perfect programme. We can't monitor ourselves and be completely stringent in self-discipline, but we can just make efforts to improve ourselves.
What we're now asking our clients, patients, on those in recovery, is to develop a relationship with their higher power. And what we're seeing is a clearer channel opening, because what they would have seen through practicing the other principles is that there's a God of their understanding working in their life. And what we're asking here now is to really build upon that early trust, faith, hope, and develop a stronger tie.
Step 3, I made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood him to be. And step 11 gave me an opportunity to deepen that connection and find ways that worked for me to keep that conscious contact open as much as possible.
It talks about prayer and meditation. Meditation is just stopping for me and spending time maybe alone, just being rather than doing.
I think in this step, it's really being open to the experience, or open to receiving a message from a loving higher power, and being receptive to that, and then kind of channeling that energy, and then practicing what you need to do in all your daily affairs.
Prayer and meditation, for a lot of people, they can struggle with it, because a lot of people come into recovery and when the word God is mentioned, that they cringe, they don't have an understanding. A lot of people reflect on childhood when they feel that a God was punishing. But it's a God of their own understanding, and that literally can be of anything.
If a higher power can be a higher power of your choice, then the way in which you pray to it or you meditate is also a matter of choice.
I'm not any part of any sort of formal religion or formal spiritual practice. I just explore different ways and explore different things that are out there. And if something fits with me and is something that's meaningful for me, then I will practice that.
It wasn't easy for me praying at first, because I needed clarity. I couldn't understand what people meant by praying to a higher power. It seemed too abstract, but by practicing, it became more and more clear. It started off with a belief, blind faith, and then it grew until eventually good things started to happen.
I found it very difficult coming from a background where I had no formalised religion, no sense of spirituality. So as I worked my way through the steps, having faith, I always associated the word faith with a formalised religion. However, as I grew into my programme and connected with my programme of recovery at more depth, and discovered that my higher power was nature in itself, sometimes I look at it as faith is just having faith that the sun will rise in the morning and provide our planet with the nourishment it needs to give us life, to give me life, to nurture me and give me everything that I need.
Meditation for a lot of people can be just sitting still. For some people it can be listening to music. For others it can be reading a book. Just reflecting on your day, again, can be meditation for people. I try to find some space in the day just to sit quietly and be still, and as the step says, just pray for guidance. You know, my conscience is a very good place, my inner voice is a good place to direct me in the way that I need to go.
I have some set prayers that I've learnt through the fellowship, and I have a couple of my own that I say before my feet even touch the floor and before I get out of bed. And I ask for my higher power to guide me through my day, to guide my words, to guide my actions and everything that I do.
I meditate in lots of different ways. I find it really useful to be in a place where I feel that I can connect, and for me that's usually in nature. Going for a walk I can find very meditative, just sitting somewhere next to the sea or in some woods or just somewhere in nature helps me to relax and to connect with myself and with my higher power.
A lot of the time when people have prayer meditation where step 11 is concerned, it helps settle them. It helps them be still for maybe the first time in the day when they reflect on the day. It makes them feel good within themselves. A lot of people will point out with prayer meditation that they don't feel alone. They feel that they have connection with somebody or something, an understanding of their own God.
And it takes away that sort of feeling of despair and loneliness that I felt when I came into recovery. I feel whole today, you know, and when I came into recovery I was broken, and it gives me a reassurance, you know, now that I have a belief in a higher power, I never feel alone.
It's a real personal step for each individual that are in their recovery journey. I remember in my own step 11, as I said before, it's about opening personal channel and being open and aware of that connection that you're building with a higher power. And I remember somebody giving me a book, and I won't say what the book is, but I read this book and I felt a real connection with this book and what the author was saying about building a relationship with God or your higher power, and I call it God. And what I did was, because I felt so connected to this book, I started to listen to what was being said in this book and started to practice what was being said in this book and almost take it like my own personal Bible of how I was going to live my life today. And it really has served me well.
When I get up in the morning, I pray to God and I ask for him to keep me sober today. And when I retire at night, I thank God for keeping me sober every single night, because it's a real blessing that I've made it through the day without picking up a drink or a drug.
It's about time out to look at my feelings, my thoughts, just relax, to you know, and to switch off sometimes, because the world is very busy and it's a very busy place, it's a very demanding place, and sometimes I just need a piece of quiet in my life. It might be taking the dog for a walk. Or whatever it might be. But I do believe, again, as I do with step 10, that it is part of our maintenance of our recovery. It's part of saying, I have got to stop being busy all the time.
I used to find it very difficult to sit still. I used to think that meditation was something that I'd never be able to do. I just couldn't sit still long enough. I couldn't get my mind to calm down long enough to be able to meditate. But through learning techniques to do that and practicing doing that, I've been able to achieve that sense of peace and stillness that I never thought I'd be able to get.
The ways in which I see myself meditating or praying to my own higher power, which happens to be nature and all that it encompasses, is just by getting out and going for long walks with my dogs, being in amongst nature, connecting with the elements of nature, the beauty of nature, and that's my own form of meditation. So I may not get down on my hands and knees like somebody who has a formal God, but to me that's my way of connecting with it, having a conscious contact with my own personal higher power.
Meditation is just so important to be able to be calmer in yourself. It helps to calm your mind down, it helps your mind to be more peaceful. It gives me the faith and the knowledge to know that I'm doing the right thing on a daily basis. I feel that it's right what I'm doing. It's a good daily practice to have meditation and prayer.
Step 12 talks about having had a spiritual awakening. For me, that spiritual awakening was a gradual process. I think initially when I first came into recovery, I felt like there was quite a big awakening of the spirit. It was an ongoing process, just through working on myself, doing the step work, understanding about spiritual principles, starting to live my life by spiritual principles. I feel that awakening, that journey, was a process throughout the steps.
I didn't just reach step 12 and suddenly feel like a light had shined on me and I was having this wonderful spiritual experience like you might see on a TV show or something. And I wasn't even sure that I'd actually had a spiritual awakening. It was probably a little bit further down the line when I started to get a concept of what a spiritual awakening was for me personally. And I guess just not harming people like I had in my addiction and having a consistent period of time where I was no longer harming people, no longer committing crime. And in fact, quite the opposite. I was now actually helping people and helping addicts to stop having similar patterns, behavioural patterns as I had. Helping them to come through their own addiction and manage their addiction. And so it was kind of like a process of turning from bad to good, and that in itself made me feel some kind of spiritual uplifting, made me feel better about myself. And as time went on, I was able to kind of attach that to actually maybe that's what spiritual awakening's about for me.
We're talking about a psychological change, and a psychological change is what they call the spiritual awakening.
And so by getting to step 12 and recognising that spiritual awakening and that journey I had, step 12 then tells us to carry that message to other addicts and to practice the spiritual principles in all our affairs.
When you've worked through the 12 steps and you get to step 12, it really is carrying the message. And that could be as simple as being there for somebody who was struggling. A message within the 12-step fellowship would be talking about how things have worked for you, what you needed to do when you were at any other certain step, and what you did for it to work for you. A message may be even talking about what was difficult for you in your recovery. It may not have all been rose-tinted glasses. It could have been some real difficulties.
What we're now being asked to do is to go out and help others by doing service in meetings, helping other addicts, showing our gratitude for the psychological change that has come about us as a result of working the other 11 principles, and passing that on to other people, or passing that on to other addicts.
And the message is that we get a spiritual awakening as a result of working these steps. That's what happened to me, and that's the message I try to give to others. I do that in many different ways. I have sponsees that I I share my experience with, I share my experience of working through the steps, I share my experience of my own recovery with, and share the message that way.
It's certainly about a message to the newcomer. The 12-step programme is a programme of recovery that is geared around newcomers and encouraging newcomers in to come in. Certainly if you've been around within the fellowships for years and you've worked through the 12 steps, you should have, hopefully, a message of recovery that can almost entice others in.
The most important thing is for them to bring their own message of recovery, and not what's said in the book, not what they've heard somebody else say, but share their own personal experience of how they got to this point.
It's not something that I can give to anyone or force anybody to do. It's not about that. It's just about trying to demonstrate and show people the benefits that doing the step work has had on me, how it's helped to change my life, how it's helped for me to become a better person and stay clean.
I feel very lucky to have come across the 12 steps, to have done them, and to now be a sponsor and to be helping other women going through the steps themselves, taking them through the steps. It's what can I do for other people.
So sponsorship is paramount to the 12-step programme. If people don't hang around and sponsor people after they've completed the 12 steps, then the programme would die out. There would be nobody left to pass the message back. So sponsorship's a massive part of the programme, and it also helps spiritual growth in the individual to be able to give something back to the still suffering addict.
It's about taking what I've learned on this process and this journey to others, taking an interest in others and helping them. It's about giving back and using what I've learned to carry the message to others.
The spiritual principles that I've learnt throughout doing the steps, the main principles being honesty, open-mindedness and willingness. They to me are the important spiritual principles. You know, and I learn not only to apply them to my recovery but to all areas of my life as much as I can.
If you have worked to this step and you are sharing and giving a message of recovery to people, you are continuing with what has been given to you, because you can only keep what you have by giving it away.
I was going to meetings for 7 months before I